In the ultimate social experiment, the public is invited to join in an open mic discussion. The goal is to give voice to the common man, without prejudice, and just like in real life, if you want to talk, you show your face. Will they discuss on geopolitics, economics, military topics, or current affairs? Or will this just become yet another Twitter shit show? In an ultimate test of free speech and free expression, I present to you the DPA Open Mic. So in the DPA Open Mic 33, we start off with the discussion over the biggest thing that happened over the past week, as per the open mic, was the Ukrainian offensive.
Alright, offensive? What offensive?
If they had air cover and more artillery, that'd be a tight little assault package. But, they're setting them in minefields and they're basically getting ambushed. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole lot of it, but I mean, it seems to me like they're going down terrain that favors the Russians.
I think that if imagine a world where they go and they do take Melitopol, and then they do destroy the Kerch Bridge again, right? And they fully destroy it this time. In a case like that, I think that the Russians are going to be pretty interested in negotiating, or certainly more interested in negotiating than they are now. Alternatively, they might just get angrier and escalate the conflict further, but that seems like the logical strategy for me. I didn't think about Divka like that, though. That is an option.
One of the biggest contentious point that was being talked about is the Kakhovka Dam destruction.
Thanks to the dam being gone, it now is an attack vector, and that benefits the stronger side, which is the Russians. With it there as a threat that either side could use, it was really more to the Ukrainians' benefit.
What about when the world knows, if it is true, I don't know, nobody really can say for sure, that Ukraine destroyed that dam. But if Ukraine did it, if someone can prove it somewhere, right or wrong, now or later, it's a blow on all the Ukrainian narrative. They did something so reckless to get some objectives. I think that most of the world that's not committed to this war will say, we are free now. We can say no. Our moral stand goes, we are not with this shit. We are fed up.
Then came this very controversial idea that this war will end up with Ukraine being more Russian than ever before, and someone else will be raising your children.
Some American said that someone else will raise your children. And I think about this war because so many Ukrainian men will die that when Russia comes and settles this land, ethnically, blood Russians will take over Ukraine, whether they want it or not. So they've literally effed themselves. The Ukrainians, by sending all their military-aged men, have bred themselves out of the equation. And we're not talking about like a small dent. We're talking about an entire generation, and perhaps 2 generations of men will die in this war. And that will outbreed themselves. So, I mean,
I also don't understand them saying that, okay, the Ukrainian men die and the women and the children will become Russian. It's not so easy then. The respect for the Russians...
I didn't say that, by the way, Prada. I didn't say that, by the way. I said that term. Okay, then don't say what I said.
I know, I expect you to clarify that because that might be a misunderstanding.
And then there is this intriguing concept that every civil war breeds a powerful country.
I think the smarter people in general are leaving Ukraine, I think. But the real big point I want to make, and maybe bring it back to the military realm, is that if we look at this as a civil war of people who are really the same, but are taking 2 ideological stances, which is the way I think Dan just said it, and I think the way I feel about it, then militarily, do civil wars result when they end in a tougher opponent or country or a weaker one. I mean, Vietnam fought a civil war, ended up very tough at the end. Korea fought a civil war, they're still in a frozen conflict. Both sides of that conflict are very, very tough today. The American Civil War, after that ended, they incorporated the Confederate veterans and they went all the way to the West Coast and then further all the way over to the Pacific. So they got tougher. I mean, you show me a civil war and I'll show you a population with a huge number of combat-trained veterans who are tough as hell.
The mine clearing tank that is leading the line seems to not work when air support is not present.
Like, I was on the tanks. The way I see it would have done is we would have moved up and like supported the combat engineers, and they would have had vehicles. They would have rolled up with a MIG charge, fired that out, cleared a lane. Then we probably would have had tanks with the blades on them and the plows go in front to protect the engineers as they planted flags and marked the lane to move through. But I mean, that's all why you have complete air superiority. No one's bombing you, no one's shooting missiles at you, no one's dropping artillery on you.
Yeah. The lack of MIG-licks, the lack of combat engineers in NATO, you don't put armor in front of men. Usually there's this amount of combat engineers on the floor, sweeping. I mean, I was in front of light armored vehicles in Afghanistan. I was in front of MRAPs. I was in front of Buffaloes, which actually clear mines. The Marine Corps puts men in front of armor. Why? Because it's more effective. But there was none of that. There was no MIG-licks. There was no APOPs. There was no anything for clearing anything to actually push forward. Forget about the air. Forget about the artillery. Even the simplest of things, to advance an armored vehicle, there's no open avenue of approach. So if there's no line charge, why are you moving these forces towards a tree line?
And then we went into some long discussion about Russian change of battle concepts. You know, they went from the BTG, the battalion tactical groups, into divisional setup.
Russians, first of all, are always modifying their forces. Just because they went into mobile tactical groups where the command was actually at, where they were actually making the decisions to change on the battlefield mostly, they went to the MTGs. But it reflects the type of fighting they do. If you read about it in the Russian way of war, is that there's nothing to prevent them from flowing through these objects, getting enough room between these units to maneuver, and then they go back into a mobile battle group 20 miles wide, 60 miles deep, like a lawnmower. There's nothing. That's why this really this Ukrainian offense just it kind of drives me crazy, because if they use their reserve to be able to fortify failure in what was once known as Bakhmut, and then trying these PR attacks, there's nothing to stop the Russians to just forming up like that and moving forward.
Then we went into this discussion into the myth of nuclear weapons and how Russia will eventually just get more and more aggressive.
The Russian government is telling its people, and has been for quite some time, that NATO has attacked Russia and Russia is in a war with NATO. Now, the Baltic states don't hear that, right? They should, because they're in NATO, right? And so if Russia is saying we are in a war with NATO, what Russia is saying is we are in a war with the Baltic states. It might not have turned hot on that front, but that's what the Russian government are telling their people. And now, again, the position in the Baltic states is Russia will never attack us because NATO's got nuclear weapons. But what I want you to think about is this. NATO would never have gone into Ukraine in 2014 and performed a military coup. Do you know why? Because Russia's got nuclear weapons.
And that was just a taste of what the DPA Open Mic is about, especially for this episode 33. This is not everything that was being discussed within the open mic. It was 3 hours long. Typically we do 5 hours, and I'm trying to do it shorter so that I can make this video, but no, who knows. And I would like to invite you guys to come on the DPA Open Mic, share your views. If you're shy, you can always just chat within the live chat with other like-minded individuals, and let's grow the DPA Open Mic, bring the voice to the people. This free speech, the free expression of opinions, of thoughts, of feelings, and perhaps we can all learn something from one another. This is the most international podcast, I believe, on YouTube and around the world, where this is the only place where you can actually see people letting you know what is the exact situation about in their country, so that you do not get duped by the mainstream media, or the fake news, or the misinformation, or the propaganda. And is there sanctions in a certain place? Are they really struggling with electric, energy prices? You can just ask them. They are people from all around the world that are very happy to share their feelings, their experience with you, and together we will be more informed. And this is the DPA Open Mic.